What we're intending to show today is sort of the use of Anaplan, which is sort of a technology platform used for planning and analysis purposes for the mining industry, and how we can leverage Anaplan to support modeling the complete end-to-end mining process within a single technology platform. Just a bit about the folks who are with you today. My name is Matt Kane. I'm an associate principal with a firm called Spaulding Ridge. We're going to introduce a little bit more about the firm in a slide here or so, but just a little bit about my background. I've been sort of in the technology and planning and analysis transformation space for about 10 to 12 years now, working with a number of different platforms. And most recently working exclusively with Anaplan. I work at a number of different verticals, but have had the privilege of working with a number of different mining organizations in implementing Anaplan and various technologies to improve everything from financials to operational planning and analysis. With me today as well is Olaf, who's a director with the Spaulding Ridge team and also sort of one of our resident mining experts. And we also have Kim Andrews from the Anaplan team, who's going to be speaking a bit to some specifics on the platform. A little bit about Spaulding Ridge. We are a gold partner. That's the sort of, from an Anaplan perspective, that's the highest level of sort of partnership that you can have with Anaplan. We are one of the largest Anaplan partners in the world. But we don't just do Anaplan. Our firm is sort of designed around this concept of driving digital transformation and using the best tool for the best job. So we are very much aligned with a number of different technologies across, the different avenues and functional purposes as to what an organization might want to use them for. And you can see just a few of the other technologies that we partner with and implement here. But again, thinking about using the best tool for the best job, our best in practice or best in market solution for planning and analysis is Anaplan. And so we're very much aligned there for organizations looking to technology to support them in that. Just a little bit about our sort of geographical presence. We have offices in North America, Europe and the UK, Australia, and in Asia. And we are one of the largest Anaplan partners globally. Okay. So next, I'm going to turn it over to Kim from the Anaplan team, and Kim's going to walk us through a couple slides, and then I will be back in a few minutes to talk specifically around Anaplan for mining.
Thanks, Matt. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining the call. Interesting, we've got a couple of customers joining us today as well, so hopefully what I'm covering will also be some new learnings for you as well. Anaplan was spawned back in 2011. Our founders of the company have come from a very long and rich background dating back over 30 years with other technologies which are more on-premise based. And they set out to really look at addressing a modern platform for addressing budgeting, planning, forecasting, and analytics. And as such, Anaplan was born. We really look to try to address connecting all data, all people across all plans in an organization. So not just focusing on one area, but all plans, all on a single platform. We typically align plans around business process. So whether it be a single process, departmentalized, or across an entire organization, as we start moving to what you'll hear more of around the term connected planning. The results of which I'll cover off in a few other slides, but effectively customers that use Anaplan certainly see significant increase in speed, agility, and visibility or connectivity and transparency across the plans in the organization. Anaplan is a true cloud-based provider. There's a subscription fee, and as part of that, you get a log-on. From the log-on perspective, everything is taken care of. So we take care of the full infrastructure, all the backups, the connectivity to different systems, etc. So it's a very, very easy platform to get started on. Next slide, thanks, Matt. So when we look at it, typical challenges that most organisations face, it is that disconnected approach to budgeting, planning, forecasting. On the left-hand side, you'll see a typical representation of different departments, and within those departments, that you typically might find various planning or bespoke planning products for each line of business. The challenges with those are in many cases they're inflexible, many outdated, and as a result of that, what we typically find is organisations export data into Excel and then start having the challenges of how to get a consistent view across the organisation of plans. And certainly very disconnected. Ultimately ends up in having a lot of data wrangling to connect data across those different plans. What Anaplan has achieved is providing our customers with the ability to operate on one platform that's able to span across all different lines of business. To be able to also provide that real-time platform so that a change in one part of the business will automatically flow through to the other parts of the business. Matt, please, next slide. Some of the benefits of Anaplan and why companies choose Anaplan is really down to a number of core items. The first one is Anaplan is actually built and designed from the ground up on the cloud to be able to optimize and enable true integrated planning, or we call it connected planning. One platform, single source of the platform, so the single user interface, same look and feel. The models and the plans are connected, and that really enables the organisation to scale that. From a business ownership perspective, we've got minimal IT involvement needed to run an Anaplan implementation. Typically, we find users of Anaplan have come from lines of business. If they're used to using Excel for building models in Excel, they're quite comfortable in building models in Anaplan. Which also allows for removing that bottleneck that you typically would get in having to rely on perhaps IT to build models for you and then make modifications. So it really is a business-owned and operated capability. I mentioned about the scalability of the platform. So when our builders of Anaplan set out, they looked at a number of different capabilities that they wanted the platform to have, and as part of that was removing typical challenges that existed in legacy systems. So the idea with the scalability and performance is to get real-time updates in the system, not having to wait for updates, data loads, or click the old F9 to calculate and wait. So again, it provides that ability to scale and perform consistently no matter where you are in the world. As long as you're on the platform and have an internet connection, you're up and running. The idea of the responsiveness as well, we'll talk about it being rapid response or rapid calculations, is that we expect users to experience Google-like responsiveness, make a change in the platform and see the results flowing through with that sort of speed. And we really set out to adopt a customer-first discipline within Anaplan, making sure that we put the customer first in every interaction. We provide every customer with a customer success business partner to really help guide you on that Anaplan journey, and we have advanced support programs available. One of the things that really stands out for Anaplan, in one of the reasons we're a leader in the area of budgeting, planning, forecasting, is the full range of capabilities that we have. So we certainly focus on our core capability of planning, budgeting, forecasting, and analysis. But I guess the representation at the bottom of the screen really helps hone in on the fact that we also do analysis, the scenario modeling, management reporting. One of the key areas for Anaplan is the collaboration and enabling the different parts of the organisation to communicate and connect together across a common workflow. One of the things that some of the existing customers may not be aware of as well is the fact that obviously Anaplan comes with a statistical platform of capabilities, 30 algorithms on board the platform. But we also have on the platform as well the linear optimization, leveraging the Gurobi optimization engine, and also from a prediction perspective, leveraging Amazon forecast for machine learning forecasting. So bring a lot greater accuracy to the models. And supporting that for all the back-end capability that you'd expect is connectivity to any system, whether it be SAP or other mine site systems, etc. The ability to bring data into a central store so that you have the concept of having a unified approach and consistency for data across the organization, such that you're looking at the same information no matter where you are across the organization. We bring the robust application lifecycle management to bear to help with the transitioning across different environments from development through to user acceptance, testing through production, right down to the security enablement and online learning. Another thing that Anaplan has online, as well as our business partners, is the concept of the App Hub, which are a number of pre-built models, or if you think accelerators to help get started, representing different functional things like budgeting, planning, forecasting, typical use cases. Next slide, thanks, Matt. One of the things that I just wanted to reiterate on this screen is that we can bring data in from pretty much any system, whether it be a cloud-based system or on-premise software. We have our own capability, but we can also leverage other platform providers on the system, for instance, Dell Boomi, OneCloud Informatica, MuleSoft, etc. And then bring it into the Anaplan system. And then the interoperability across other technologies for extending the platform, for instance, Power BI, Tableau, Excel, PowerPoint. And for some organizations that are using Palantir, we can use Palantir as a data source, but also get data into Palantir. That's it from me, Matt. I'll pass back to yourself.
Thank you very much. Couldn't find the mute button there. Sorry about that. So if you've seen Anaplan before, you may be familiar with sort of this concept of a honeycomb, which we can see on the right-hand side here. And this is meant to depict Anaplan from a use case perspective. And so this is sort of how we see Anaplan and its potential uses for mining. So we really do think that, and it's not just the mining industry, it's really a sort of any vertical, that Anaplan can really play a part in the planning process across the entire organization, across all functions. And so we really do see it as an enterprise-wide solution with enterprise-wide solution capabilities. So it's not a point solution, and it's not purchased in modules or sort of functionality. It's something that, you know, as mentioned, it's a subscription-based platform, but when you actually have the platform, if you subscribe to it, you don't necessarily, you know, purchase one of these particular areas of planning that you see inside these little hexagons on the right-hand side. It's really, the platform is molded and configured to fit your exact processes. And so organizations will elect to deploy use cases within Anaplan and connect them together to achieve the highest value for them. And so here's just, you know, a number of the examples that we've seen be deployed in Anaplan and connected with each other sort of across the spectrum of planning processes that may be going on. And so again, I think it's important to identify that it's you know, Anaplan, everything that we'll see today from a demo perspective is highly configurable, and it's not that you know, as an organization you need to purchase the life of mine module. It's a platform that you subscribe to, and you elect to deploy use cases. So maybe described instead of a module, as you see in these hexagons and this honeycomb on the right. Let's think about them as, you know, use cases that I can decide to deploy with my use of the Anaplan platform. And so really, again, it's not a tool that is particularly focused on a certain function. It is very much planning and analysis focused, and that is inclusive of any function across the business with just some of the examples that we see here. I'm going to jump forward again, and if we, pardon me, just going to get to the next slide here. There we go. Okay. So if we look at that honeycomb a little bit differently and we look at what the journey might look like, this is sort of thinking about, you know, a left to right sort of time spectrum of how you may deploy Anaplan and how we've seen some organizations go about deploying it. So we have the same concept of this honeycomb. But if we think about how you may expand left to right, where organizations typically start is looking at their operational systems. And as Kim mentioned, you know, we have sort of an agnostic capability to tap into any source system that you have that you'd like to ingest data from. It could be HR systems, it could be transactional financial systems, it could be mining software, you know, operational systems or asset systems. All of that can come into Anaplan, and it's really about getting the data that's pertinent to your use case, and then deploying the use case linked to that data that you've loaded in. And so organizations will typically look at deploying 1 to 2, maybe 3 use cases at a time, and then looking to scale and add on to that. And so maybe you'd, as you can see here, moving again sort of left to right, you can imagine how you may start with some of the core use cases that you think of from a planning and analysis perspective, but it's really all there for you to add on to. And another thing that I'll mention is that because Anaplan has no underlying programming that needs to be configured by end users, it's all configured from a calculation perspective with Excel-like formulas. Deploying new use cases is very simple. They can be deployed in an isolated manner without impacting existing use cases, or they can be deployed in sort of a connected manner, which is of course where we see the highest value, but again, without impacting existing use cases. So we do see organizations take the approach of, you know, implementing a number of use cases and then frequently expanding on that as they want to tap into other areas of their organization and planning and connecting them. So with that, I will turn it over to Olaf, who's going to walk us through a brief demonstration today. And I'll let Olaf do maybe an introduction of what he's going to actually show, but we'll show a number of these use cases that we've configured in Anaplan. And you'll get to see the calculations at work, the drivers at work, the visualizations at work. And again, we probably will only be able to cover 2 or 3 of the individual use cases that we see on this honeycomb. But remember that from a platform perspective, it's all there, it's all available. And just because we're seeing a particular area of the planning process today, which I believe is largely, you know, budgeting and forecasting and elements of the life of mine planning, that doesn't mean that other areas of the planning process are not also capable in Anaplan. So I'll stop there, and Olaf, I'll stop sharing and let you take over.
Thank you, Matt. Let me just bring my screen up here. Presume that my screen is sharing correctly. Yes, so thanks. What we're seeing here is a sort of a landing page, I guess, and you know, and it speaks a bit to the honeycomb that we were looking at just now. Yeah, so the way we deploy the solution is use cases. So we really are focused on the user interaction with the technology. So what we have here is a dashboard. And you know, we could organize this dashboard, you know, in any way that makes sense to us. You know, we have in this environment, what we have is sort of you know, a couple of dashboards that relate to mine production, and you know, something about milling. So there would be different disciplines. They could be site specific. They could be, you know, HR, capital, operating costs. You know, it is really up to us to define how we present this and how we let the users interact with it. So today, what I'm going to show you is a bit of just sort of the width and breadth of it. We're going to go sort of all the way down to daily dashboard, so we can understand, you know, the reporting capability, you know, and sort of touch on some of these honeycomb areas, and then focus on the budgeting. So the first thing that I'm going to select here is planning process. So we really want to drive a process. It's very beneficial for the organization, for the repeat processes, that there's that it can be repeated. And so here is a completion tick. So as various parties in the overall process, complete their piece, they can tick it off. And so it's very visual about where you are in a planning sequence. So this could be forecasting sequence, this could be an application for capital, or it could be the overall budgeting process. Right? The next dashboard that I'm showing is sort of an underground superintendent's dashboard. So this could be current production targets. There's usually, if we give the users some indication of how to interact with the dashboard. So there might be some instructions, there might be some links. So either the links are for the next step, or it could be a deeper dive into more detail. We might have some dashboards that take us to a different area. So these are the capital links, and I'll select that just now. We try and start at a very low level of granularity, so that it's easy to see, these are the key KPIs, and focus on those areas, and then scroll down and then see more areas of detail. So in this area, we actually have an actual budget comparison. So we pulled in the actual numbers and the budget. And so in this instance here, there's an ability for the user to sort of communicate any commentary on the current performance. So context in this environment is really important, because the management on the site does not always understand how their data is actually consumed by corporate, or a pit soup doesn't know who else is going to look at the data. So put some context to it, and then everybody is looking at the same story and understands the numbers in the context. So we're looking at underground development. So these are not cost metrics, these are physical mine planning metrics. So these areas actually relate here to some capital projects. So I'm just going to go forward and have a look at the capital project. So, unlike the operating costs, capital projects have all these discrete events, and they don't fall in nicely with the chart of accounts, because often there's a WPS code, but when you're creating the budget, it hasn't been approved yet. So Anaplan is very flexible in showing this information, whether it's whether it's deeply codified, or whether it is just entered by the user. So in this instance, this is capital. We're highlighting some risk issues, and there's some decisions. So as we sort of drive it up the decision tree, people need to decide on certain options, and then either decide which option to go. So in this instance, this could be really driving your, an application for capital, and then capital control. So all these discrete little projects, we could be seeing, committed funds versus actual progress, and so we can understand where we are. So this is on capital. And if I look at the daily production, this would be, this is more relevant to daily. So I'm going to just click on a daily plan here. So showing us a card for monthly. So this is sort of, we would be reaching out to various systems, if you've got dispatch systems and drilling systems, and to the mill, daily production targets. So everybody's looking at the same dashboard. What we're really doing is just presenting all the data, so everybody's looking at the same dashboard. We can present this data also on a tablet or on mobile devices. So we would just arrange the cards in a different fashion so that it can be consumed easily on a mobile device. And here's a daily progress chart on tons hauled, right? And again, we can compare it to the budget, we can compare it to last week's forecast. There are many metrics we can compare it to, so that it's easily consumed, and it's a call to action. So it could be, day shift corresponding or communicating with night shift communicating with day shift, and vice versa. So we could have text and context to these to the production that has been achieved, right? It doesn't just have to be tons. It could be, number of stopes blasted or how much support we've installed. So I'm just going to reset this to here. So it is going. To him. The next dashboard that I've landed on is sort of the production plan, short range plan. So we've gone from daily, we've gone to short range plan. What we're bringing in is some historical context to this plan. I think, there are many planning tools out there, but having the actual data, the historical data with it is so meaningful, because then you've got some context of how are we actually trending, what does this plan say about the future. Not everybody that is reviewing this data has always been with the operation for a long time and has that context. So it's very important for me to bring that data into the model. These little cards here, we've got little red buttons that show whether we are exceeding the budget or so the red dot means that we are actually doing worse than in this particular plan than last year's actual. So we can have quick visual cues of the strength, as it were, of the plan, right? Or the assumptions that have been used in the model, right? When we're looking at planning environment, there could be a action for the user, so to import a new mine plan, and I will talk a bit about that when I look at the more detailed plan, but it would be presented like this, and then a routine in the background would go and collect and ingest data from an external source. It can be automated, so if there's a lot of live data, we could automate that, but if there's a new version to be consumed, then it could be an elective process like this. The user can also choose which periods to see, so you can let the user interact and focus on different areas. So in this instance, I sort of scrolled off, the current year, as it were, and then only show the future year. So in this case, this is actually the future year. And the level of detail obviously is very configurable for us, according to the use cases that we define as we sort of build up the model, right? This dashboard also allows us to compare various scenarios. So the user can select, in this case, I'd be assuming that we'd be importing multiple plans, and we want to compare how they compare to the budget or compare with each other. So this is an interactive environment for the user to select different plans, and that plan is going through the entire cost model in the background. So basically all the logic that pertains to the plan that is driven off that plan is pulled up and presented to us on this dashboard. So we basically have the full results of these two plans in memory presented to us. And now we can start comparing different mine plan options. And sometimes there's very little fine points of these scenarios. So, you would want to have the detail that is relevant, whether it might just be different phase designs or different, stope sequencing that we're looking at, right? And how does it present itself in the grade or, in the financial plan? So we would choose cards that speak to that. So I'll keep on positioning my card here. So this dashboard talks to consuming the mine plan at its lowest level of detail. Now, that's certainly not a requirement, but I just want to put it out there that we can certainly get that data. Sometimes, when I've worked with budgeting tools and tried to consume the plan from a scheduling tool, there's a high level of resolution on the planning tool, and then it has to be sort of presented and aggregated in a certain fashion to be consumed by the budgeting tool. Because this is a multi-user environment, we can let the mine planning department take ownership inside this tool to get this data into the tool, verify the way that it is aggregated inside here is absolutely the same as it is in their planning tool, and then hand it over to, you know, wherever it is used to develop the cost drivers, right? So we can certainly carry that level of detail and have visual impact and have, you know, the visualization of that, so that mine planning department, you know, could take ownership of that specific step. You know, if it is already in a different data warehouse and we just, you know, consume it at a high level, we certainly could do that too. Right, so I'm now landing sort of on the review area of the budgeting process. So we sort of, you know, just to sort of focus of where we've gone to, we've looked at, you know, the short range plan, we've looked at actual dashboards, we've looked at different detail. So up to now, we've sort of explored briefly different areas of the honeycomb that Matt spoke about earlier on. And now I want to focus a bit more on, you know, the budgeting process. So in this capacity, I'm actually not developing the budget. I'm more in a review capacity. The way the budget is presented in this environment here, you know, would be, again, configurable as we drive up the use cases. So at a bare minimum, we would be looking at it at your chart of account level. You know, certain customers have chart of account levels that are at a very, not at a very granular level. You know, so we might have more detail so that it's easier to understand how the different mine plan is impacting the different cost metrics. So this would be totally configurable of what we decide is the resolution that we want to see it at. What we're seeing here is actual data and then planning data. So again, just to talk about the context again, to me, it's always important, you know, it's the so what question. When you're looking at budgeting data, how does it relate to last year's budget? How does it relate to what we're currently doing? You know, bring that number into context and have that in store, so it's easier to actually, you know, sign off on it and understand it and manage it, right? So here are the total dollars, you know, in the bar chart. I find it much easier to look at unit costs. So if I'm looking at a unit cost here, yeah, the chart at the bottom here will react to what I'm clicking on, and I can see while the actuals are trending here and the forecast is a bit higher, right? So if I'm sort of interrogating a number and I want to see where that logic comes from, you know, we are looking at a dashboard that is retrieving data from an underlying model that is shared by many users. So if I can drill down on it and say, well, where did you get this number from? So we are now going to step through the hierarchy of where it got the data from. So it's going to say, well, I'm actually looking at Ora Preto. So it's going through, you know, the hierarchy of the location first to see where, you know, it's aggregating the data, I guess. So Ora Preto in this instance is a mine. And you know, it says, right, yeah, this is the unit cost we had, loading cost divided by the tons hauled. And if I sort of keep on stepping down on that, it'll keep on showing us the syntax underlying that data, right? So here for Ora Preto, I had $90,000, keep on stepping down. And it keeps on, you know, this here, what looks like a heading, this is actually this formula syntax. This is a line plus that line plus that line. So as Matt was saying earlier on, the tool is intended to be, you know, used, and the intention is for the client to have a journey and be able to sort of work in it yourself, right? You do not need to be HTML coder or you know, Visual Basic or something to be able to run formula in here. It is totally exposed to the user, right? Here's the formula, here are the numbers, and I'm going to keep on stepping down on it, and it's telling me how deep I'm reaching into the model. So this cost is fuel cost and lubricant cost and other costs, and I can keep on stepping down, and it says it's the liters consumed times a burn rate, right? And here I have a number, you know, 17,000 liters. So if I close this and I go if I go to the actual drivers, that could be a link or inside the data, or it could be outside. It can take me to where we've actually built up the logic. So if I go to the area, I think I was looking at loading, I should be able to see Pareto, the liters consumed. I'm just looking for the number here.
I think you're looking at hauling. I think loading was just above.
Correct. I was like, that does not look correct. There's the number that I was looking at, 17,000 liters. So, and again, any line I pick here is being graphed. So then I can see that, this rate is coming up, and I can actually look at the burn rate, and I can see, well, they've chosen a very high burn rate. They're sort of currently running, these are the actuals, they're running at this rate, and they've chosen that rate. And that might be valid. That might be valid decision by the engineering department. But now you can actually, when you're reviewing the data, you can ask relevant questions about why the cost profile that they see that is being presented at a high level is coming up from these drivers. So we're trying to make it visible, right? How deep we reach into the logic, there's a sweet spot, right? I mean, if you sort of have very few lines, then it's very tough to sort of calibrate these models, because they will not react to different mining methods or different hauling distances or material types that we're drilling and blasting. So you need to have the resolution that is relevant of how you're measuring it, and what will inform what it, how the costs are built up from the bottom up. This is a very much a bottom up, building up the cost driver tree. But conversely, right, I'm always hesitant to build models that might be too engineering centric, that are very difficult to see, right? One of the guiding principles when we build these models is to make sure that it is sustainable, and the logic is understandable by the user, right? So it's got to be relevant. But to our user stories, the level of resolution that we have here is certainly in line with what do we need to be able to understand and manage the budget, and the reforecasting process for that matter. So in this instance, it was a burn rate times the hours, and the other part of the riddle would be to look at the prices, right? And again, there are actual prices and future prices. So if I'm looking at back to the fuel cost, graphed up at the top. So here I've got historical prices, and then actual prices for the future. So I'll switch that back on. So to me, it's always important, to bring any of these plan numbers back into context with what is actually happening, right? So this was one small discipline within the mining budget. Obviously, there would also be something about the labor costs. There would be something about the maintenance costs, and there would be different disciplines, right? We'd be looking at the processing plant, wherever we put the battery limits of our budget on, these are all different models that have similar logic. Data like this, like the fuel price, this could be a corporate directive, or it could be from a supply chain model that is actually posting this data. If multiple instances of the same data is sourced in multiple modules, we would put it into what we call a data hub, and every model will just look at the data hub to consume this. So whether it might be labor rates or consumable prices like fuel that are common between the sites, right? This is a specific site or operator, then we would all have it in the data hub to make sure everybody's looking at the same data. Often this data is really out of the control of the engineering team that's building up the budget, unless they're testing something new that they haven't used in the budget before. So, think of many of these instances all working in parallel to build up the budget. And as we come, each of these would be a series of modules. They're all being interrogated at the same time. Obviously, some of these processes might be sequential. you might want to see the costs for the mine once you've done the maintenance, or you obviously need to be able to have imported the mine plan before you can sort of really review the costing of that plan. So obviously there might be sequence to it, and that would be honored in how we sort of track it. And once we've reviewed it, we would then change our status and say, yep, that looks good. So this is the process of managing the approval process, you know, whether it's a quarterly forecast or a month or annual budget. And then we go to, you know, an overview. So these plans get consolidated at a higher level, yeah, at a corporate level. And again, we can see, yeah, what is the region doing? You know, there's an organic consolidation process within this data. Yeah, typically it's facilitated by the chart of accounts, but every, you know, all the costs, all the numbers we're looking at are governed by the dimensions of how they hang together. So the accumulation is organic in here. And again, we are able to compare, you know, a budget with actuals or future budget with actuals at a high level in organization, and have some cues of what that means. A quick note on the long range plan, you know, there are always a lot of discussions about how do we, you know, is it essential to carry out all the detail that we have in the budget to push that all out into the future for the long range plan? Sometimes it's easier to do that because then the logic is consistent and easy to audit, yeah, but obviously it generates a lot of data. Nobody really cares 10 years out in which cost center, how many dollars we're spending for a specific cost element, right? So there are methods where we could just say, yeah, we are collapsing the first 5 years of mine planning data that was done in detail, and we are generating unit cost drivers that will react to distance or depth or, you know, material types or something like that. So we still have enough granularity that the model reacts according to the cost drivers, but we don't carry the entire resolution of all the underlying cost drivers to you know, evaluate long-term plans, right? And these long-term plans are there to really close the loop with the strategic mine planning process, which is happening in a spatial environment, right? So, yeah, we should be having similar unit rates, if not the same unit rates, to draw on. Otherwise, there's a big disconnect about how we actually designing the mine and how we are making decisions on the long-term costing environment. So again, you know, comparing two different plan versions with each other and looking at, you know, cash flow, and yeah, I would typically expect this to be, you know, shown at a total inclusive cost to, you know, if it's metal or, you know, whatever the unit cost drivers are at a very high level to understand, you know, the profitability of that project. So, you know, I will leave that there. So we've sort of gone from short range plans, daily dashboards, consuming very detailed plans into the budgeting process, and then had a look at how that consolidates up, and had a quick look at a long range plan, right? My interaction is with all of these areas are obviously all by tiles, and I've let myself be led through the process, but, you know, the user is able to sort of select their environment, you know, discreetly as they wish to, right? And again, how we arrange it is often arranged by the user stories, and that's how we also build up and deploy the solution, right? So there could be pieces that are deployed first and the long range piece does not exist yet, right? Because that user story has not been built. So that concludes the live demonstration. Matt, I will hand it back to you. I'm going to stop my sharing here.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and share again.
And you should be able to share again.
Yep. You just give me a quick heads up if anyone can see.
Yeah, I can see the questions. It's fine.
Excellent, thank you. So yeah, hopefully a couple things that you picked up as we were watching the demonstration. You know, just a really quick recap. I mean, when we think about the honeycomb and the different use cases that we're able to include in Anaplan, one of the underlying key functions in Anaplan that allows us to do that is that we have a structured model in the sense that we use, controlled lists and hierarchies and relationships and mapping between those. But we have an unlimited number of those that I can put in the platform. So I'm really only limited by the lists and the hierarchies that I'd like to have in there. And so if I relate that to what we saw in the demo, we saw planning at the daily level. And we also saw, that rolling up to the weeks and the months, and then we saw the life of mine, obviously at a higher level of detail, just the year. When we looked at the mine plan, we saw elements of it building up from the individual sector. We saw, chart of accounts based analysis certainly for things like costs, but we also saw us going into building up revenue. Maybe by the different metals that might not necessarily land exactly in the chart of accounts that way. We also saw, projects, existing capital projects or new ones. And then maybe just a quick, line of sight, that demo that we saw was just sort of a fraction of our overall sort of mining demo that we have in Anaplan. A couple of features and functionality that we didn't see is more of an asset maintenance plan and lifecycle costing element of Anaplan, where we look at an individual asset or component level, and we look at maintenance strategies for minimizing costs, reducing risks, and then what certain maintenance plans then have an impact on from a labor staffing and maintenance cost perspective. And then that all connects into my financial results. So hopefully what you picked up on was just one of the reasons that Anaplan is able to, that we think is able to functionally expand across all areas of the mine planning process, is because we can go into those niche areas with the hierarchies and the calculations and the lists and points of data that are specific to that area, but in a structured way, connect it back so that it's all talking to each other. It's all in real time, as Olaf was showing. As you change a data point, everything connected to that is updated. So I'm looking at real-time outputs. So hopefully that is something that resonated as you saw the different areas there, that sort of resonated back to the slides we showed at the beginning with starting with a couple of those use cases and expanding that honeycomb so that you get a higher return on investment there as you put more use cases in. So at this point, I think we're going to do questions just after, but I think Kim, if you wanted to speak to how an organization might get started with Anaplan, how they might think about, if there's something they're interested in starting their journey and maybe doing a bit of a further assessment and sort of value consideration.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, happy to. One of the great things about Anaplan is our ability to support you to be able to look at Anaplan from many different perspectives. So today, Olaf has done a great job of providing you with a glimpse of what's in the Spaulding Ridge demo for mining, and I can assure you there's significantly more within that model. So one of the offers that we've got is to be able to run a lengthier session for you all to deep dive into that model or any other models that we have. We've got a raft of functional models and industry models to be able to leverage. So typically we allow a couple of hours if you'd like to go into one of those generic demonstrations. For organisations that are wanting to understand more about Anaplan, we do have what we call a build from scratch hands-on workshop, a short hands-on way of actually running through a workshop approach, instructor-led example of using Anaplan for building some models around a fictitious company. We typically allow 2 to 3 hours for that session, but it's a really good way to get your hands onto the product and actually see and understand how easy it is to build models within Anaplan. If you're interested in it, we're also happy to consider building customized demonstrations, leveraging your data, org structures, and business rules. It provides one of the best examples of Anaplan for your organization using your own data. Happy to discuss that with anyone. at any time. The other part is that we have what we classify as a value hypothesis summary. So Anaplan has a raft of benchmarking information from a number of different sources. And as part of that, we've got them in an Anaplan model that can assist in helping to articulate what a return on investment and payback period might be from leveraging the Anaplan platform. So feel free to call us if you're interested in looking at that as well. Happy to help. Matt?
Perfect, thank you. Let me jump to the next slide. So we've got our contact information here. There we are. If you wanted to reach out and learn more, as Kim said, I think there's a number of different ways that we can get started. But we would love to hear from anyone with questions about how perhaps the platform works, questions about whether or not a particular use case might be feasible. And of course, usually the answer is yes, and sort of how we might go about it. And even looking to do sort of one of those, that the value analysis or the building workshops that Kim mentioned is also a great place to start. So with that, maybe I will see if there's any questions that have come in, and I guess we can open it up for questions if there are any. We've got about 8 minutes left. And I believe that you may need to ask your questions in the chat. So I will stop sharing at this point and see if I see any questions come in on the chat. So, and Ellen, keep me honest here if there's a different way that folks should be asking, but I think it's through the chat window.
Matt, there's a question about the maintenance strategies down to the bill of materials.
Got it.
You want to talk about that?
Yeah, so that's a good question. One of our mining demo models that we have does model maintenance down to the individual bill of materials. So I'll just give a really quick overview of how it works. It's a planning model that's meant to sort of branch back into a supply chain planning model. And so it looks at all of the fixed and mobile fleets that exist at the site, and it breaks them down into individual pieces or components, whatever is sort of necessary for that piece of equipment. And it identifies different types of both planned and unplanned maintenance that you may end up doing on that. And there's a couple different ways that can be done, but in the demo model we have, it's set up to look at the maintenance interval based on sort of the OEM's manufacturer's recommendations of, you know, the number of hours that you run on that piece of machinery, that as to when you may want to perform that, you know, small, medium, large, or overhaul maintenance. But it looks at that, and then it assigns a bill of materials down to individual part types and individual components that you may be changing out in that type of maintenance, in that scheduled or unscheduled maintenance interval for that piece of equipment. And then from there, it looks at creating sort of an inventory supply plan, or I guess you'd say that would create your demand plan, needing to be able to service particular fleet assets with certain parts for that scheduled maintenance. And then it breaks them down into an inventory SKU level and allows us to then do a supply plan looking at different options that we have for lead times, order quantities, et cetera, for looking at vendors supplying those. So we have a number of organizations that we're working with that do that kind of thing, both within mining and in other industries entirely. But to answer the question, which again, just a recap of the question, have you modeled maintenance strategies and sort of connected them down to the bill of materials? And the answer is yes. And sort of what I just walked through was a really high level overview of what one of our demo models has done. And what we've seen in the past is Anaplan, you know, walking from projected maintenance intervals on assets based on my production plan and how frequently I expect to use them and run them, and then having that break down back into different maintenance types, to using different products, using different SKUs that I may need, and then having that sort of work backwards into a supply plan. Any other questions?
Matt, there's another question about the asset planning, whether we received a strategy, right? Whether we're reaching into, like, if it's SAP PM and reach into there to get the strategy. I think there are multiple ways to tackle that. You can actually build it up from the bottom up and, take the strategy, which is, the intervals and the hierarchy and the current meter readings, at the measuring points, and you recalculate to project it forward. The other way, what you could do is also just, consume historical closed workshop data or, work orders, and use that to sort of just project it forward without looking at the strategy, right? I guess, there are various ways to tackle that, how you project that forward, and what tools you use inside Anaplan, to sort of project that into the future. But one of the keys that we have is we have the future estimated usage of the assets, right? So it's not just a historical projection, but it is actually linked to the mine plan. So we're making that connection with the future hours, that the gear is actually going to be run. I hope that answers that question, Aslam.
Excellent. Any other questions? We've got about 3 minutes left.
Excellent.
Okay, we got another question. Based on the live demo, you have budget and mine plan. Is that from one use case model? That would probably be one use case that we wrap together, and that's where we bring in the operational side of things. Let's say the pre-financials, in the mine plan, and then we link that directly to the underlying costing that produces the financial plan. So I would consider that a one use case model. Yes, the KPIs and the metrics that give us the operational view of things, and efficiencies and run rates and things like that, and then the costing side of it, which helps to translate the mine plan into our financial results. So I would consider those both part of what I would think of as sort of a bottoms-up budget forecast use case. And then, sort of tangentially to that, you might have another use case that you deployed later or at the same time, again, depending on where the value is, where, the life of mine maybe comes in after that foundation set up, or maybe you would elect to do it at the same time. But to answer the question, I think it's one use case. Okay, we've got about 2 minutes left. See if there's any other questions. Okay, so it looks like we've run out of questions. Thanks again for attending. Hope it was informative, and our goal was just to sort of give you an understanding of what Anaplan is capable of. Give you a little bit of a knowledge about who we are as both from Anaplan and Spaulding Ridge as partners with the platform, and in our experiences, what we've seen organizations leverage it for value add in their area. And again, we hope to hear from you if you have any follow-up questions or inquiries on any of the material, or potentially how to understand, maybe looking further into something that might be a value add for your team. So thank you very much, and maybe I'll ask Olaf, Kim, if you'd like to add anything before we close out. Otherwise, I think we can leave it there.
Nothing from myself other than to thank everyone for your attendance today. We're here. If we can help with anything, please feel free to get in contact. Thank you.
Same from my side. Thanks, Kim, and thanks, Matt, for hosting it. My email address is there. Please contact us. We're building out the capability all the time, so it's a very exciting product for us.